Hey guys, it's Christina. Welcome back to my channel. And I have a guest with me this week. As you can tell, I'm talking to Lance Johnson of the See Through podcast. It's been one of my favorite podcasts of the last couple of years. He interviews a lot of blind and visually impaired people, and I wanted to have him on today to share his story and so y'all could learn about him. Thank you so much, Lance, for making time today to come on.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is cool.
So what was your inspiration for starting your podcast?
That's a great question. Well, I've always been like interested in creating media. I started in high school making like just kind of goofy movies with my friends. Like intentionally bad, like B movie horror movies type stuff,
Oh,
about
cool. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So then that kind of got me familiar with like making videos and filmmaking. And then I went to school for film. I studied film studies. And I had a minor in creative writing. And then I got into video production as like my career. Um, and then I basically through that, I got more familiar with cameras and sound equipment. So I had this kind of technical background in video and audio.
Mhm.
And then I love podcasting, or I love podcasts, I should say. So I wanted to make one myself. So then when I was thinking about, all right, what kind of topics could I cover? I have an eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa. My mom has it as well. My mom is legally blind, so I grew up with a legally blind mom. Um, and I didn't really know much about it. I didn't really know much about the blindness community. I didn't really know much. I didn't really know any other people in the blind community. And I felt like my curiosity was getting higher about it because I was starting to lose more vision on, myself.
Mhm.
And when you have the eye disease like retinitis pigmentosa, it's degenerative and it's kind of unpredictable and it's slow and you don't really know how it's going to turn out for you.
Mhm.
And I was always kind of terrified of it. And partly I figured out was because part of that was because I didn't intentionally like process having RP.
Mhm.
So I wanted to kind of force myself to process it. And I wanted to make something in return. I wanted to kind of make it a project. So the podcast kind of came out of me having a background in it, wanting to create things, but also me being curious about learning about blindness and seeing how it's going to affect me, as I age into my RP.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a fun project for me to have. I always have side projects. And this has been my favorite side project I've ever had. Um, and I think that's why I've been doing it for 4 years now.
Oh,
And
cool.
I'm over 100 episodes, but yeah, it's kind of like the perfect storm of life situation
Mhm.
mixed with my personal hobbies of, video and audio.
Yeah, so your family members that have, is it one family member that has RP or?
My mom and older sister.
Oh,
I have
okay.
an older brother, but he did not inherit
Oh,
the
okay.
genes.
So are they also
Uh,
kind of in the creative field of like video and audio and that kind of
no,
stuff?
none of them are.
Oh, okay.
My mom was a school teacher
Oh,
and
nice.
she worked a full career, and retired as a school teacher. Even probably the last decade or so, she did, while being legally blind. Um, so I respect that a lot. And my sister is she's in the counseling field. She has 2 masters in psychology and is a completely different field.
Mm.
And my brother, he works in like construction management. So we're all kind of doing different things.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
but yeah, I just ended up being, involved in, you know, filmmaking, video creation,
That's
now
cool.
podcasting.
Yeah, yeah. I was really surprised when you said you made like goofy like horror type movies. Is
Oh
that
yeah.
is that Is that one of your inspirations? Like, is that something you think you might go back to make like short films one day, or?
I'll be honest with you, that was the most fun I've ever had. Was in high school making those silly videos we made. It ended up being 45 minutes long. Part of that's because we didn't quite know how to edit, so there was just a lot of fluffs left in.
Yeah,
So it probably cut down. It would have been way shorter, but it was 45 minutes, and it was called Mutant Rat Attack,
yeah.
and it was about these two giant mutant rats that were kind of killing people in our small town in North Carolina.
Oh
And
my
then me and a
gosh.
group of friends made it. I played a rat, and I played a homeless person who used to work at a scientific lab where toxic waste was released, and now I'm like training someone else to help defeat the rats, and it was a lot of fun. We kind of just made it up as we went.
Oh, that's so
Uh,
funny. So yeah, it was kind of like
yeah,
improv.
yeah. We had zero script, and just kind of we didn't even have like an outline of a story. We would just film one scene at a time, and then just thought of as we went, like how would this tie together, and then it ended up being a 45-minute movie that you know our classmates just found amusing and funny, uh but yeah, that kind of like I had so much fun with that's kind of what made me be like, oh, I need to go to college for this.
Mm,
But yeah,
mm,
that's the
mm,
most fun because it was just pure fun. There was no
mm.
intention to make it money off of it. There was no intention. It was just kind of being silly, and goofing off with your friends. And I think I try to remind myself of that sometimes now because I still work as a video editor.
Mhm.
It's my full time job. I podcasting just like a side thing I do. It's not profitable for me, but I try to remind myself of the times when I was making these silly movies and how I still am that person, and I still have that drive, even though sometimes like when you become like as you age, now you have adult stresses, and now you got to pay bills, and you have to kind of be a little bit more structured in how you operate.
Mhm.
But I try to retain that like childlike almost spontaneity, silliness
Mhm.
when I can.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
did you grow up knowing any other blind or visually impaired people aside from your family members?
No, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this podcast because I
Okay.
I realized that I was like, I only really know my mom
Mm, mhm.
um and sister.
Yeah.
And my mom wasn't really an open book about vision loss.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
kind of like the elephant in the room
Mm,
in my
mhm.
childhood,
Yeah.
um, which kind of shaped me in a weird way because I was diagnosed um, around 12, 13 years old. And
Mm,
I didn't really have symptoms at the time, but they were just able to tell through like looking in my eye with pictures and all these various tests. They figured out that I had RP. So, I learned that at a young age. And then my mom doesn't really talk about it. My dad doesn't really talk about my mom's vision. My brother doesn't really talk about it.
mm,
My sister doesn't really talk about it.
mhm,
Um, so that's kind of how I kind of took on that approach where I didn't talk about it and I just kind of suppressed it. And then I basically acted like that and suppressed it and didn't tell anyone except people that were really close to me. I would tell, but that was it. I wasn't public about it at all. I wouldn't
Okay.
tell employers at job interviews or
Mm,
anything like that until um, I decided to move to where I live now in Brooklyn, New York.
mm,
I had to leave a job, and I wanted to give them an authentic reason. So that's when the first time I was open about it.
mm,
And then
mm,
I was moving from North Carolina to New York,
mm,
and I had lived in North Carolina for 27 years. And that was the only state I've lived in. So there's too many people to tell. So I basically did the Instagram post
mm,
approach,
mm.
where I'm going to make a post and
Yeah.
kind of just tell everyone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in that video, I kind of talked about like, I'm moving to New York. Um, I don't want to drive anymore due to this eye condition I have. I want to use the subway.
Okay.
I'm a video editor, so it's okay because there's a lot of work for me.
Mhm.
That's the first time I was kind of open. I call it like coming out kind of as
Mhm.
someone with RP.
Mhm.
And I got a lot of good feedback on that. And I
Mhm.
kind of realized that it wasn't as scary as I thought it was to be public about it.
Right, right.
Because it used to terrify me to be public about it. I thought I would get like pity. I thought I just I just thought nothing good would come from it, or more good would come from it than good. More bad would come from it than good.
Mhm.
Um, so when that kind of happened, it kind of made me realize like, oh, I was kind of scared of it for nothing.
Mhm.
Um, and then I moved to New York City. I'm finally public about it,
Mhm.
and then the pandemic hits,
Mhm.
and I'm in lockdown, and I had been kind of brainstorming the podcast at that point. Um, but it wasn't like I wasn't like all in on starting it, but the
Right.
lockdown kind of streamlined it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then just due to all the time, stuck in my apartment.
Mhm.
And that's when I did the first episode and started reaching out to people because, I wanted to hear from others and learn from others. Um, so now I know hundreds of people,
Yeah, that's so
thousands of
cool.
people.
You
Yeah.
brought a lot of people in the podcast that I've never even heard of some of these people before. So where do you find your guests?
S- Most of the time I find them on social media. Like I have a Instagram account, at See Through Pod, and
Mhm.
Instagram will suggest people to me.
Okay.
I'll kind of see like certain people that are kind of prominent figures in the blindness community who post a lot of content
Yeah.
and are very, very active. And it's kind of unavoidable to like not stumble upon a piece of their videos.
Right, right.
Um, so some people you just kind of without even trying like
Mm.
find
Mhm. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
their content's everywhere. And
Right.
then sometimes people find me, they'll email me
Mm. Mhm.
or direct message me. Um, and it just kind of goes all which way. Um, I have a lot of people suggest guests to me. I have a lot of people reach out to be guests,
Mm.
but I just don't have, like I said, this is a side project, so I don't have
Right, right. Yeah,
unlimited time
exactly.
to do it.
Yeah.
But what I try to do is have a wider range of guests with different stories,
Mhm.
so it doesn't get stale and it's not the same thing every time.
Right, right. Yeah, that's what I love about it. So what has been like the most like surprising, or and it doesn't even have to be, it can or cannot be whatever, a guest that's been on your podcast, but what has been like um just kind of the most interesting job that you've heard of a blind person having?
Oh, a job. Well, this past guest, Sam Atwood, um, he was a very interesting guy, had a life full of a variety of jobs, but at one point he worked um, at a shop that sold guns.
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting,
Yeah, yeah.
blind man selling guns.
Right? Yeah, you wouldn't think that.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the job thing is very interesting because I would say almost half of the guests I talk to, unfortunately, most of them don't have full time work.
Mhm, mhm.
Just because of employment rates are very low for the blindness community.
Right. Yeah. It seems like like I've done a couple Google searches, and depending on what I look at, it always seems to be somewhere between 70 to 80%
Yeah,
of blind people are unemployed. And it's so sad because, a lot of that has to do with the lack of education in society and people's low expectations of blind people. Like,
yeah. I always say it's people underestimate the blind community,
mhm.
but there's also clear just disadvantages. Like most people, if they wanted to, if they're short on money, they could become an Uber driver. They could become
Right.
a bartender, a waiter or
Mhm.
server. There's all these
Mhm.
types of service industry positions that they could, pick up on the
Right.
side.
Right.
So the blindness community is already has an uphill battle because they're already limited in work that they'll get hired for. And then when they go in to get interviewed for these positions, they might not get hired because, they do have a disability and the management doesn't want to work around it. So they're limited in
Right.
two ways already. They're limited in
Mhm.
what jobs that are actually doable for them, and then they're limited in the people that will actually give them a chance.
Right. Yeah, because some
So
people just see it and they think you're a liability if you're blind. They don't know anything about accommodations,
yeah, exactly.
So it's like an educational. It's like the blind person has to end up trying to educate them.
Yeah.
But
And I feel like people also too don't like to be educated in a weird way. Like
yeah,
they
that
don't
is really weird. Yeah, I have found that some sighted people, it's like they like to think that they know what's best for the blind community, even if
Yeah.
they've never had our lived experience.
Yeah.
It's just very, very weird. But I do love how normalized it's become on social media, for people
Mhm.
to openly discuss their disabilities. I mean, there's been a lot that I've learned just by watching content creators. I wasn't even
Mhm.
comfortable calling myself disabled until I started watching more YouTubers, and they
Yeah.
kind of took back their power with that term. And
Yeah.
like I've learned about guide dogs from watching YouTube videos. I didn't grow
Yeah.
up in
YouTube's
an
awesome.
area where people had guide dogs. They just had canes, or they would
Mhm.
try to pass as sighted.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's great. Um and I think it would help me when I was younger, having all this kind of support and being able to visualize and hear people living with blindness, talk about their lives and talk
Mhm.
about just the daily life.
Yes.
Um, because the more you hear about, and I've said this before, the more I talk to people and the more I hear about it, the more I learn about it, the less scary
Mhm.
blindness becomes.
Right.
Whereas when I was very dismissive of learning about it and just wanted to kind of suppress that I had it, pretend I didn't have RP, that was when I was the most terrified of it. So
Mhm.
it's kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
counterproductive. And these people, these content creators are doing a great job just making it feel like, hey, it's not a death sentence,
Right.
I li-
Exactly. Right.
I'm happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But then you also get you get the real stuff too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's
Right.
difficulties with it too. Um, so you get that as well. And then you have some people who have like toxic positivity, and then you have some people who have toxic negativity.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's up to you on who you decide to follow and who you decide to listen to. But I think it's a great thing that you have basically who have all different types of people and perspectives to learn from and pick and choose who you want
Right.
to model yourself after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's wonderful for the younger generations is that they have, a plethora, once the younger generation or once their parents of a blind child finds out about all these people on social media, then they have a ton of different resources they can go to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think community is very important, to make some friends, with your eye condition or a different eye condition. Doesn't really matter. Other
Mhm.
disabilities,
Mhm.
I think it's a good thing because you realize like, oh, you're not the only person going through this. And you can also throw if you have a problem, you can kind of have other people help you solve it and give you advice on like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
facing this difficulty. Like how is it? Do you have any advice to get around this, or how do you adapt to this or that? Um, but if you're just on an island and you're just by yourself, you're not going to have kind of advice given to you. You can learn a lot just through watching content, YouTube, and all that. But I would also strongly advise have real life connections.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would advise that too. If anybody's
Yeah,
out there and they don't really have if they don't really know anybody who's blind, look on Google and see what your closest blindness organization is and get in touch with them. And then, a lot of
yeah,
people will be
I
happy
agree.
to help.
Yeah, it's awesome, and the more I get affiliated with blindness organizations, and like I'll go. Like last year, I went to a stand up comedy show here in New York City
Oh, cool.
that was put on to support Lighthouse for the Blind here,
Okay.
and it had like had big names pop in, like Jim Gaffigan did a pop in set, and um, it was like top tier comedy, and the whole audience, like 90% of the audience was blind,
Oh, wow.
and some of the comedians were blind,
Hmm.
and then you know I'm there, I'm there with my wife, and it's all very new to her.
Right.
So, but it's good for her to see it, to see the audience, and then to see and to hear these jokes, and it's good for me as well to kind of be able to see people smiling, laughing at jokes, having a good night out,
Hmm.
versus the caricature of like, stuck inside, miserable, disabled person. The more I put myself out there in these situations, it's just like the more comfortable I feel,
Yeah.
and the more I feel like I understand the community more, because without like the hands-on experience, you just won't fully understand it.
Right. Yeah, that's something I have not experienced is a blind like a stand-up comedy show with blind stand-up comedians. That must have been really
Yeah, it
cool.
was unique, that they're making jokes specific about, guide dogs, and some of the comedians uh were not, visually impaired. So they would make some jokes about the audience,
Mm.
and it was all kind of poking fun. And, a lot of people think that, the disability community or blindness community is like overly sensitive, but the audience was kind of loving, getting roasted a little bit, and it was just kind of refreshing. And um yeah, but but a lot of people wouldn't expect that. They wouldn't expect a comedy event centered around blindness to be a fun time. Yeah, it was such a great night.
Oh, cool. Is that
That's
something
just
they
one
do?
example.
Yeah, is that something they do every year?
I think they do it every year. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
gonna I'm gonna
Huh.
try to go again this
Yeah,
year.
if I'm ever in New York and I hear about it, I'll see if I can go up there.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. And they also do raffles, and they raise a lot of money, and it all goes towards, these different organizations that help,
Oh,
the
cool,
blind community.
cool.
So it's all for a good cause.
Yeah, the only two blindness organizations I've grown up with and gone to events for were the Lighthouse for the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind. So,
Yeah.
whenever I see any content creators that are doing something totally different, I'm always curious about those.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of my work in terms of raising money has been for Foundation Fighting Blindness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's so many great organizations that you could get involved with that are more tailored to you. It just depends on what you really are going for and what kind of organization you want to support. If you want your money to go towards funding research for potential cures, or do you want your money going towards helping people living with blindness directly just have better lives?
Mm-hmm.
I think a healthy mix is good. It just depends on what you're into.
Yeah, yeah. And so speaking about the blindness community, I know a lot of these places tend to have like conventions every year. And I know at a lot of the conventions they have like different events going on. So have you ever thought about approaching a convention to see about maybe doing like a live taping of your podcast?
Yeah, I have. I really want to go to a Visions conference for Foundation Fighting Blindness. The only issue is um, get, travel expenses, hotel expenses. In the past, I've been approached to host like a retinitis pigmentosa kind of meet and greet, I guess is what you would call it.
Yeah.
But it was in Florida, and they could only afford to just basically give me a free pass to the conference, and then the
Mm-hmm.
flight and hotel would have been out of my pocket, and it just didn't seem worth my
Mm.
money, I guess.
Yeah.
Because New York City is expensive.
Right, right.
I got full-time job, so to take off time from work to take off time from work to not make money to spend money, so long story short, it's just like I would love to, but it has to make sense with my schedule.
Right, right.
I actually have an event coming up for the Enchanted Hills camp. It's a camp in Northern California, for like blind kids and teenagers.
Mm.
And I'm going out there to do um, a live podcast
Oh, cool.
with the CEO. It's for the Lighthouse for the Blind for San Francisco out there.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going out there in July to do that,
Mhm.
as well as do a presentation about podcasting and hands-on kind of um, experience with the kids around podcasting.
Oh,
And now,
cool, cool.
so that's kind of my first
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
try with that,
Right.
and we'll see how it goes. It can be stressful, lugging camera and audio equipment out to a different state, and then
Mm.
having to run sound and video all
Mm.
on your own, and but I try to push myself. I try to grow as a podcaster, and sometimes comfort is the enemy of growth. Um, so
Mhm,
sometimes I
mhm,
make
mhm.
myself do things that I don't really feel comfortable doing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I hope, to just learn more about myself in the process and to see if it's something I want to do more of.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's how we grow, by getting out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
So one of the segments that I don't know how often you do it on your podcast, but it's sometimes you would you'd talk about some of like the news articles that would pertain to
Hmm.
blindness. So I wanted to ask, what is a blindness related invention that's either presently on the market or that's coming out in the future that you're looking forward to?
I just saw one that it kind of blew my mind for how simple it was. But it was basically this company in Australia is has made this night vision goggle esque glasses, but it's like this really film, like it's like the thinness of like a cellophane wrap, so it would fit on your glasses, and it's supposed to give you almost night vision in the same way like you would see through like night vision goggles.
Oh, wow.
And as someone with RP, my weakness, I guess, biggest weakness would be low light, dark situations.
Mhm.
So if I could just pop on a pair of glasses, versus have like a huge bulky night vision goggle setup like you see in like military action movies, but if I could just put on a pair of glasses and it would help me see better in the dark, I would absolutely love that because it just seems like such a simple invention.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but that's like a simple one that I'm excited to see because it seems very practical and could be right around the corner. In terms of other inventions, um, I'm I'm nervous about it, but I'm also very interested and curious around it. But Neuralink, I'm very interested to see where that goes, which is Elon Musk's brain implant. It's like a chip that goes in your head,
Mhm.
and um, there's been some human trials, I think, clinical trials being done already. But the claim is it will basically via a camera, like you could wear a pair of smart glasses and then that would signal it would signal the video feed from the smart glasses. So there'd be a camera on a pair of smart glasses that basically show you what you're seeing, and then it would send that signal to the chip in your brain, giving you sight. So that's very interesting to me. And then there's all sorts of other uses for the Neuralink. Um, but yeah, there's a lot that I'm excited about. I feel like we're in this interesting time where tech and technology is kind of outpacing the medical side of
Mm-hmm.
the world, where um, there's really interesting clinical trials going on with stem cells, being directed. And I'll be honest, I'm very specific right now, talking about stuff related to retinitis pigmentosa versus other eye conditions. That's what I know most about. But like, for example, like the Neuralink is a universal thing, for blindness. Whereas like some of these other things, like the night vision glasses would be specific to people with RP or have trouble in low light. And the stem cells directed right into the retina, which could replenish retinal cells, would benefit me with retinitis pigmentosa. And then there's a lot of stuff being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of what's gonna come out first, what's gonna be approved first, how expensive is it gonna be,
Mm-hmm.
that these types of questions. But there's so many things on the market coming out or on their way to, or trying to be on the market, that it's a good time. It's the best time. It already is the best time to have a visual impairment because you got so much accessible technology. Um, you go back 10, 20 years even, and
Mm.
you don't even have basic stuff that you have now. So it's
Right.
only
Yeah,
going
the
to get, it's
latest
only going to get
thing.
better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the latest thing I see a lot of people talking about is how excited they are about AI and
Yeah.
how the different apps can do different things for them and all. But one other question I wanted to ask you pertaining to podcasts. So, what advice would you have for someone who's thinking of starting a podcast?
I would say do it. I think I think you're overthinking it if you think it's too much work or too much trouble. You have to really want to podcast because it takes a lot of your time.
Mm.
But if you truly feel like you want a podcast, it's probably the most accessible form of media out there. You just have to have a webcam and a microphone to start with. And you can buy a cheap microphone. You can buy a used microphone. Um, or you could just use, AirPods or whatever, headphones, or just computer audio. Just start, find a topic. You can use Zoom like we're on right now to do interviews. Um, and just start and then learn as you go. But I warn about this in one of my episodes about podcasting, is don't get stuck in the planning phase, because some people will be like, think for months about, what should I call it? What should this be about? What should my logo be? What should this be? And I think some of that is you should do, to kind of maximize, you know, your target audience, and so people know exactly what type of niche you're trying to cover. Um, but for the most part, I think just don't get stuck in the planning phase, and just, even if it's not the perfect equipment you want to use, just go ahead and start, because trust me, your first episodes are not going to be good. So just just
Yeah.
just start.
Honestly, that's
Um,
kind of the same advice I've heard about filmmaking too, and YouTube. Just pretty much anything creative. It's like
yeah,
just start. The first thing is just going to be like trial and error.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. Is just don't overthink it. Just have fun with what you're doing. Um,
yeah,
Thank you
exactly.
so much for making time to be on the channel today. This has been a lot of fun. It's been very informative and educational. And I'm going to go ahead and link all of your social media links in the description so people can follow you and subscribe to your
Yeah,
channel.
thanks for having me. Yeah, and give my podcast is available on all streaming platforms, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And then if you want to watch the video versions of my podcast episodes, you can watch those on YouTube. And then I also have other content on YouTube as well, um, that you might find interesting. But yeah, and I'm on social media basically on every platform, so you know don't hesitate to reach out, and maybe you'll like it.
Great. Thank you so much. And to all my viewers who have watched this the whole way through, thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like. Go to Lance's YouTube channel for the See Through podcast and please subscribe to it.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Hit it.
Yeah.